this video, I'm going to take you through Porter's genetic strategies. So that's Michael Porter, and he's written quite a few different theories about various different aspects of strategy, but today we're going to look at his genetic strategies. So for Michael Porter, this is a universal model, which means that he believes that it doesn't matter size of the organisation, what sector you're in, what challenges you might be facing as an organisation, that this model, you will be able to take it and you will be able to apply it to any situation whatsoever. So let's have a look and see what the model actually involves. So there are two main elements to the theory. One is a cost leadership strategy, or the other option would be a differentiation strategy. And I'm going to go into those in a little bit more detail. But a third element that you have to be aware of as well is a focus. And that's looking at the how much of a market there is for the products or services that the company are offering. So I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but this focus idea or market share, if you like, applies to both cost leadership and to differentiation. So let's have a look at cost leadership first of all. Basically, a company that adopts an organisation, because this can be applied to the public sector as well, so it's not just for the private sector, but an organisation that has a cost leadership strategy will be focused on trying to keep their costs to a minimum. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're producing really, really cheap products. It's a case of that they're trying to operate in a competitive market, and that they're just trying to be cheaper than the competition. So in the UK, for example, and I would imagine perhaps elsewhere, an example of this might be supermarkets, where they're competing with each other and trying to attract a customer base by offering their products at the cheapest prices possible. So generally speaking, with a cost leadership strategy within an organisation, they will be offering goods and services that are similar to other organisations. So if you go to buy a bottle of milk, there's not really an awful lot to distinguish one milk retailer from another milk retailer. Milk is pretty much the same. So it is something that perhaps you would want to go and buy. All things being equal, you will pay the cheapest price for your milk. So a company that's following a cost leadership strategy will be trying to make sure that they can source that milk for as cheap a price as possible, so that they can then pass on that cost saving to the customers. So they're looking for lowering their costs, and they're looking to increase their sales at the same time. So that's cost leadership. Differentiation is where a company wants to stand out from the competition. They want to sell a product that is offering something a little bit extra. It could be the product itself that's seen as being enhanced quality, or there's an image or a brand reputation attached to it, or it could be the customer service experience. So it may not necessarily be the product itself, but it's the customer experience and the customer service, the aftercare that's wrapped up in what they're providing to the customers. And as I've said in the second bullet point on the slide that you can see in front of you, the differences with differentiation can be real or perceived. So usually an example that I would use would be if you took something like, do people prefer Coca-Cola or Pepsi? They're both Coke drinks. So in theory, they should be the same, but people tend to have a brand loyalty to one or the other. Is that real? Is there actually a tangible difference between the different products? Do they taste different, or is it that you prefer the image and the reputation of one organisation over another? But differentiation is where the company is trying to make themselves stand out in some way from the competition. So rather than competing on price, they're competing on quality, the reputation, customer experience. They're tapping into something else that's going to attract the customers, and it's making them stand out as being a little bit different, hence the name differentiation. So that's the basics of cost leadership and differentiation. Now, as I said, the focus is where we look at the market share that a company has, and we can put this into a broad focus. So really with a broad focus, you're looking at a mass market, or you're looking at a narrow focus, which is usually a very small, very specific part of the market. And we can apply this to both cost leadership and to differentiation. So thinking about a broad focus, as I say, we're looking at mass market, as I say, supermarkets, and they're targeting the mass population. And in terms of cost leadership, a mass market would be trying to keep your costs down, and you can do that through economies of scale because you're buying in so much of a product. You may be looking at mass production, so that's a way of keeping your costs down in terms of how you're actually producing the goods that you're going on to sell. Narrow focus, it's quite difficult to relate it to cost leadership, but that would be where there's a really, really narrow focus on trying to get sales in a particular area, but at the same time you're still doing something that's going to differentiate yourself from the competition, so that you're offering something special to that narrow market. It's more common if you think about differentiation, where you would have a niche market where you're going to specialise in something really exclusive, targeted at a very, very small part of the market. Generally speaking, it's thought that or by Michael Porter, it's thought that the strategies are mutually exclusive. You either take cost leadership focus, or you take a differentiation focus. That you can't do both. You can't have a combination of both of them, because if you do that, it could get confused, and there's a conflict between offering perhaps increased customer service, where you're going to be spending more money perhaps in training for your workforce, and that would compete with something like cost leadership, where you're focused on trying to keep the costs down and trying to keep the costs as low as possible. But it's something to think about, is this still the case? In reality, when you're in the workplace, is that actually how things work? Is it clear cut that you have one or the other? Or is it possible to have a blend, a mix of both? Or again, as I stated at the beginning, Porter puts this across as being a universal model, that it should be able to be applied in any organisation, irrespective of size or sector or whatever. Is that also the case? Is it something that can be applied to all organisations? So a couple of finishing questions for you to think about. But if you've got any questions for me, please don't hesitate to drop me a message. Thank you for listening.